Good Wednesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Browns out at the Greenbrier, a walkthrough, not a really busy day. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. He's the senior analyst, has been with the Browns at the Greenbrier since they went there. Fred, what have been your biggest takeaways from what has gone on with the Browns out at the Greenbrier where you've been with them?
Well, there's a lot of familiarity now. You have some continuity in the players, in the structure, the practices. You can tell that everything was new last year when they got there. This year, the majority know what to do, and the rookies and the new people just follow in line. But you have a little bit of a semblance of new coaches, mostly on the offensive side. So I guess the biggest takeaway has been the continuity, familiarity. Um, for the most part, you still have some of the star players kind of off to the side, not doing a whole lot. They were just, after 3 days of no pads. Monday was to be the first day in pads. They were in pads, but we got some mountain rainstorms where they had to move the practice up to try to beat a gully washer. And so it was shorter. They didn't do a whole lot. Yesterday, they had a morning practice, got moved to about 2:30 in the afternoon. They did a little more. They did team 11 on 11, 7 on 7 in pads, really, or shells for the first time. But I guess the biggest thing is, big question was Deshaun Watson. Would he throw every day? He never did in the entire offseason. It was every other day. The first 5 practices he's participated, he's thrown. He's looked pretty good. I mean, inconsistent at times, but as early as it is, I guess the big milestone is that he's doing it every day and there's not a setback where they're, you know, shutting him down. So he had a scheduled, originally we were told he was going to not throw yesterday, but he ended up throwing. So today was the off day other than the walkthrough. It was closed to the media. Tomorrow, he'll be back out there expected to throw. And Nick Chubb, I mean, I reported on it. We couldn't video it, but after practice one day, after interviews, we were walking, back to our media tent, and Chubb was out with a trainer sprinting, and I didn't have really anything to compare him to, but he looked like the Nick Chubb to me. He was flying, you know, and I mean, he looked about his full speed. It was pretty much straight line. He even zigzagged a little bit, but they're downplaying, taking things slow, but I think he's ahead of schedule. I don't know when that'll mean that he'll end up playing, but he looked pretty good. So there's been different things. Mike Vrabel, he looks like quite an asset. He's running all over the field, coaching everybody, and we talked to him, and there's a lot of positives right now. You haven't really had any adversity, any major injuries, anything like that.
The other thing that strikes me, they're kind of ramping up to what would be full training camp practices, correct? We really haven't seen where they're going full pads and really a lot of contact, which I get why they do that. I understand it. It's kind of been the way Kevin Stefanski and this organization has run things. Is that kind of a ramp up still?
Yeah, it is acclimation. Tomorrow they're not. I believe they're going to be in shells, so that's not full pads. It's kind of somewhat, but on Friday, just before they come home, it's like a walkthrough at 9 o'clock until about 9:45. Then they get on a plane and come back to Berea. Saturday they're off. Then Sunday is first practice in Berea, open to the fans. There's only 6 this year, and so that'll be Sunday. So the thing is, Dave, this isn't like it used to be when we were younger and we'd go cover. They don't really do a whole lot of hitting. They might have an initial pop, but they don't, there's no pile driving to the ground or things like that, really. They do some of that in the individual drills, the linemen or the linebackers, but a lot of it is with dummies and things like that. So Yeah, it really is. I think preservation, because once you start playing preseason games, you really can't, you know, protect the players that are out there. It's a contact sport. So, that's kind of the do you or don't you. Mike Tomlin with the Steelers has always been noted for full go, physical contact, but I don't know if there's much difference in the injuries. They have guys that get injured, just as much as the Browns do. So yeah, it's Kevin Stefanski's style is just kind of try to get him to the regular season as healthy as possible.
Yeah, and I get it. I understand it without question. And I'm with you. There's no right or wrong. This is from CBSSports.com. Analyzing quarterbacks returning from injury. Deshaun Watson, fractured shoulder, week 10. Watson ranked 33rd yards per attempt, yards per completion, also 37th in completion percentage, 34th in our off target percentage last year. Nearly 10% of his passes, 0 to 5 yards downfield, were off target, by far the worst rate in the league. What's a reasonable better case outcome for Watson? Health is the most important, first and foremost. Perhaps they can get Watson in shotgun more and under center less, even though that goes against Kevin Stefanski's tendencies. Um, I, that's my understanding with what they're trying to do to a portion of this. I realize that we've just said it hadn't been fully padded. They haven't really gotten after things. Do you get any sense at all of what this offense will look like, and will it be significantly different?
Well, I think last year you kind of thought it was going to be when they said, they were reconstructing things, but really never translated onto the regular season. That's really why the changes were made to bring in Ken Dorsey and to really construct an offense that truly is suited to what Deshaun Watson's most comfortable with. And if you remember back to the days with the Texans, he really was pretty much totally in the shotgun and getting the ball out quick, using his mobility. Um, in the entire offseason that he was out there that we saw, I never really remember him being under center on any snaps. Now at Greenbrier, he was on a few, but I really think he's going to be in the shotgun most of the time. And I think that the whole idea with the choice routes is to get the ball out quick, just maybe even the first read or so. He seems best if he can just make a quick decision, get the ball out, let his playmakers do it. He was kind of successful with that in the last game we saw him against the Ravens when he was 14 for 14 the second half. And I think part of that is because his shoulder we found out was broken and his he had a high ankle sprain, so he wasn't able to do everything. So he was just trying to get rid of it and get it out. And I think that's what they're going to try to do is spread the field, get the ball out to Cooper, Judy, Njoku, the back, whether it be Chubb or Foreman or Ford or even Naeem Hines, get them out and let them make plays and not put all the burden on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, he processes things pretty quickly, and recognizes matchups that he wants to get to. So I'm with you. If they do that, I think it plays to his strengths. I know you wrote an article. I'm curious for you to take us through this. David Njoku last year, a glimpse of what he can do. Why do you think he can do it better? And is that a big part of this offense? Um, get him the ball and let him go to work.
Yeah, I mean, that was that was his words that, he said, what can you do? And he said he feels like it was just a glimpse. And I think was if you look at last year, a lot of his production was in the last 5, 6 games, and it happened to be when Joe Flacco was the quarterback. And I think that the coaching staff realized what a weapon he is, and they need to find ways to get him the ball. A lot of his plays were yards after catch. He was mowing over defenders. And I think that they look at him as like a wide receiver. And when they spread the field, they can find matchups and put him outside and maybe get a matchup with a linebacker or a safety and or even a corner. And if you can get him the ball quickly, in a one-on-one situation, I like the Browns' chances and Njoku's chances being able to break a tackle and have some yardage. So I think, like a lot of them, they're a little thin at tight end. He has to be able to stay on the field. But, the Browns draft him the first round. This is his 8th year. And believe it or not, he was quick to point out that he's only 28. He joined the Browns when he was 20. So he's really just coming into his prime. And last year, you were able to see what I think the Browns were waiting to develop. There's been a little bit, but last year, it was his best year, 82 catches. But I think what he's saying is a lot of that came at the end of the year. And if he can do it for a full year, he could have over 100 catches and be near the top amongst the tight ends. So I think he's definitely, if not number one, he's number one or two playmaker on this offense.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I don't think it was a function of Joe Flacco. I think it was Flacco got him the ball. I think Watson can do the same thing. All right, before we go to break, let's take a look at this. This is kind of interesting. Wondering what Elijah Moore as a wide receiver 3 looks like this season. Last year, he had 104 targets, but now you also have Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver 2. You've got Njoku, who he ascended. He kind of separated and showed what he can do last year. Bigger role for Cedric Tillman, an explosive rookie, and Jamari Thrash. The other thing is you're going to have, hopefully you have continuity at quarterback. That everything was disjointed because you had so many different quarterbacks last year. But to the point, what do you think Elijah Moore looks like as a wide receiver 3?
Well, there's a lot of leaps there. Jerry Jeudy is expected to be a big part of this offense, but really haven't even seen him do anything yet. He's been on the side. They won't say what if there's anything wrong with him other than he'll be out there really soon, kind of like Myles Garrett. He was kind of nagged in the last mini camp with, I think, a leg injury. So that's probably something to do with it. But, they expect him. They signed him to the extension on potential. So let's assume him and Cooper do what they do. Moore's in that driver's seat to be the number 3 guy. The one thing I'll say about him, he's been out there. He was out there all last summer when some of the other receivers weren't. He's been out there every day this summer. When you talk about Cedric Tillman, he's looked pretty good, but we have to see it when they start playing games. In the same way with Thrash, they draft him in the 5th round. That's not usually where you get somebody that you're expecting to produce. I'd actually say David Bell, probably is ahead of Thrash, and they want Tillman to at least be the 4 receiver, and maybe he can push for number 3. But I think Moore's still going to have his opportunity. When you have better wide receivers, if Jerry Jeudy's the threat the Browns think he is, he's going to cause attention, and Njoku's going to get attention, and Cooper's going to get attention. If Elijah Moore is getting the 4th or 5th defensive back covering him, not all these teams have multiple Pro Bowlers. He ought to be able to win some battles. So I think it all goes back to the quarterback. If the quarterback is on the field and playing well, getting the ball to these guys, there's going to be matchups out there that they're all going to be able to take advantage of. So, you mentioned it, having 5 different quarterbacks last year, and you look at some of the ones out there, a rookie who never really played before, and a guy who's a journeyman who really wasn't, that great. You could say that for 2 of them. So it comes down, having Watson out there, you hope for the most of the season. If Winston gets in there, he's looked pretty good. But it comes back to Deshaun Watson, and it's kind of the rising tide lifts all boats. If he's on the field and getting in a rhythm, there's going to be guys open, and they're going to be able to have good numbers.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report, joining us from the Greenbrier, where the Browns are undergoing training camp. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham. Stay with us.
cheddar, butter, lewd, and scratch? Find the lettuce. Make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30 show. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report, has been at the Greenbrier covering the Browns for the Orange and Brown Report. The crew from Pat McAfee talked about the potential of the 2024 Browns. This is from ESPN.
I think if you just look at their team as a whole, they were probably the most banged up team that actually went on to go and do something. They at least went to the playoffs. You know, they lose both their starting tackles to season-ending injuries. Obviously, they lose Chubb to a terrible injury. He's going to be back. They have the continuity with Schwartz and with Stefanski, both play callers on both sides of the ball. If I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, kind of love the conversation around it too, being nothing. It's the Bengals, it's the Ravens, it's the Steelers, which, of course, rightfully so, all three of those teams, they all made huge moves this offseason too. But they brought back everybody, and they really didn't lose any of their biggest pieces. And then you add Mike Vrabel. You add possibly the greatest motivator in the history of football in Jameis Winston. And yes, Deshaun Watson said these last 2 years it's been hard to block out the bullshit. Definitely an interesting way to phrase what's happened the last 2 years. But with Jameis Winston in your ear, just giving you motivation 24/7, it's probably going to help him out a lot with having him there. But yeah, also add Jerry Jeudy and Amari Cooper. Elijah Moore and David Njoku kind of came on at the end of the year, too, last year.
Same old line.
Same old line. And, you know, DeJuan Jones, he has a lot more experience now. And they added Zach Zinter in the middle from Michigan. I mean, kind of look out for the Browns if you're in the AFC.
Fred, you and I have talked about it. I can't argue with, I agree with most of what they said. And we've said this before. Biggest thing with Deshaun Watson, if he plays 15, 16, 17 games, the numbers are going to be there. They just are.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a broken record. I think it just goes back to number 4, him being on the field. You got, even statistically, the defense was number 1 in the NFL. Now, I'm more interested in how many points they allow. I think they were 11th. So I don't care where they are statistically other than points allowed. But if they can get, you know, allowing a team under 20 a game, this offense ought to be able to score points. They have a weapon with Dustin Hopkins, an accurate kicker, and he showed last year he can, you know, hit from over 50 yards. And if Watson's on the field, he's got the playmakers to get the ball. And, you know, I understand why nationally they're under the radar. They were under the radar last year, same reason. But this year they've actually proven a little bit with their defense. I think it comes back, number one, because the quarterback has not really been on the field and done much when he's been out there, but because of the division and the AFC. I mean, Myles Garrett called it a slaughterhouse, the AFC as a whole. I mean, you could make a case for a bunch of teams making, you know, to the Super Bowl. But just in the Browns division, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Browns, you could make a case for any one of those teams getting first place, or you could make a case for anyone getting last place. And a lot of it is because the quarterback. Look at the Bengals last year. Everybody thought they were ready to go to the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow gets hurt. They get last place. They still had a winning record, 9-8, but I think it was 9-8. Might have been 8-9. I think all 4 had a winning record.
Yeah. Yep,
but
they
the
did.
Steelers, you know, they went out and get Russ Wilson and Justin Fields. That, to me, was their biggest problem, was their quarterback play. And between those two, I think they upgraded. Ravens got the reigning MVP. And so that's why, you know, it's so important to win your division, because you get that, you know, you get the playoff berth, but you clinch home field advantage. You know, obviously the Ravens, you know, lost to the Chiefs, but I really think with the Browns, even last year, they're 8-1 at home. I think if they would have had a bye and had a team coming in to play them, they might have had a chance to win that first game. I know they'd had a chance, and who knows what happens, but 60 or 17 games are in the division, so it's beating each other up. And again, attrition when it comes to quarterbacks and key players. I mean, if Lamar Jackson goes down, sorry, the Ravens aren't going anywhere. If Joe Burrow is not playing, sorry, the Bengals aren't going anywhere. And the Steelers, I mean, I don't know if they are, but if Wilson and Fields aren't playing, sorry, they're not going anywhere. So it really comes down to the key player, on the team to me continues to be the quarterback. Now I think Jameis Winston's a pretty good backup. In fact, I think he can do things that Joe Flacco can't do. And he's only 30. So you want Watson to be on the field and do what he did in the past, but with this defense and the playmakers on offense and the tackles returning, I just think that they're right there.
Yeah, I'm with you. The health, it's boring to say, and a lot of people roll their eyes when you say it. Health is going to be a lot of what determines this division. Which team can stay the healthiest and have its players on the field the most? It always is. This
The
one,
final four teams last year all had their franchise quarterback,
yeah,
Mahomes, Jackson in the AFC. And you just go down the list. That is so important, and that's where I've said all along, Deshaun Watson doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler this year. If he just plays, in the top 15, top of the pack, this team can make the playoffs. They showed that last year, with five different quarterbacks. But for them to go deep, I think he really needs to, be up there in the top 10 or 12. But I think if he stays on the field, I think that he has a chance. As we saw, and I pointed out over the course of the last year, he never really got going. They always say he played 12 games since he's been here. Well, the suspension the first year, he really never could get going in the middle of that first season, 6 games. But even last year, third game, he gets hurt. He sits out. He tries to come back. He sits out. He starts up. He starts looking pretty good, and then he gets hurt again. So it's kind of unfair to judge last year because of the injuries. You don't know how much the shoulder turns out the broken bone. Was it, from the third game on, did that affect all the way through? So I'm just giving him a clean slate, and it's just time to be on the field and produce.
all right, this is from the Bleacher Report. Every team's biggest roster holes ahead of the 2024 preseason. And man, I'm scratching my head at this one. For the Browns, they have number 1 wide receiver, number 2 running back, number 3 left tackle, number 4 linebacker, and number 5 interior defensive line. Player to add now, linebacker Zach Cunningham. JOK shouldn't leave the field. Jordan Hicks will be a good addition, but another veteran to compete with Devin Bush and Tony Fields could round out the room. Cunningham found a home with the Eagles last season, showed he can still play, 85 tackles and 10 starts. Browns played 3 linebackers 16% of the time, lowest in, so that's base. They played base 16% of the time, lowest in the NFL. So that third linebacker, he's on the field 1 of every 10 and a half plays, roughly. Wide receiver, I get it. Behind Amari Cooper, you've got some question marks. To say that's the biggest roster hole, if that's the biggest roster hole, this probably is the best roster in the NFL.
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's depth. I mean, I put tight end up there. I mean, they're relying a lot on Jordan Akins. He didn't do a whole lot last year. I mean, you can say what you will about Harrison Bryant. He was a short yardage blocking guy, and he was the guy that did the quarterback sneaks. I don't know if they think Giovanni Ricci, who's kind of a combination fullback tight end, if they think he's that guy. But other than that, if Njoku goes down, you really don't have a whole lot at tight end. But linebacker, yeah, I mean, they like Tony Fields to fill that Sion Takitaki role. He's been lining up with the first team. I think they're trying to catch lightning in a bottle with Devin Bush, former top 10 pick of the Steelers, but he hasn't been the same since since the injury. Um, and I think that Andrew Berry and the coaching staff looks at it in training camp. I want to remind, the people watching is that a few years ago after training camp, they brought in Malcolm Smith, a 30-something free agent linebacker. He joined the team in the middle of training camp, and he was the second leading tackler. Last year after Greenbrier, they brought in Shelby Harris. He turned out to be probably the best defensive tackle, if not the second best. They have a list of guys like that, and after they get into training camp, whether they have injuries or not, I think they will look at areas that they feel that they're not comfortable with. Wide receiver has some unproven guys. They're counting on Judy, his potential. They're counting on Tillman to take a step. And we talked about Thrash or Bell, but I wouldn't be opposed to finding a veteran if they don't think those guys are ready to step in and contribute. But most of these are depth. The front line guys, barring injury, they're pretty solid. When you look at the starting lineup, they return everybody on defense except the two guys they let walk, Anthony Walker and Sion Taki, and they felt Jordan Hicks, the one guy replaced Walker. And as you said, they don't look at three linebackers as the most important thing. They think Tony Fields or Devin Bush can do it, or even Mohamed Diabate or Nathaniel Bookie Watson, the kid they drafted, SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So I think they'll look at everything when they get into training camp and see if they need to upgrade.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. We head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report from the Greenbrier, where the Browns are starting their training camp this year. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Morning, guys. Hope you had a great weekend. I have to call you guys when I'm thinking of things, but I just happened to watch a talk show on ESPN, and they were talking about quarterbacks or players in general who had the most pressure on them this year. Okay, and the number 4 person with the most pressure was Deshaun Watson, and I can understand that. So the number 1, okay, was Lamar Jackson, and they mentioned him as 2-time MVP of the league. Okay, sound familiar? 2-time, he's coach of the year. This guy's MVP. Anyways, they said always in the last couple years, the worst game he played was in the playoffs. He says, and you can make book on it, is what he said. And they're right. Every time he goes to the playoffs, it's not really a good game. Kind of sounds like our head coach, 45-14. Every time he goes to the playoffs, hasn't won one yet. He's either in his basement or not there. Anyways, guys, I hope you had a great weekend again. Take care.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, that's Jim from Rochester who calls in frequently. Kevin Stefanski's done a good job, and I feel silly having to defend a guy. Relative to the playoffs, yeah, they didn't play well against the Texans. Part of it was Kevin Stefanski's fault. Did you really expect them to go in there and win with what they had?
I thought they had a good chance, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting Stroud to play like he did that day. But yeah, and I wasn't expecting the defense to get exposed. But for everything that Joe Flacco did great, he threw 2 pick sixes that really jump started and really, you take that. It's hard to overcome that anytime, any game you play. But it's hard for me to agree with the criticism of Stefanski for what I've covered for since the team returned in '99. He's got a 37-30 record since he's been with the Browns. They haven't had anybody with that type, close to that type of record. You want continuity. I really think the Browns are in a good place with Stefanski and Andrew Berry. Berry's 37 and Stefanski's like 42. Sure, he's made mistakes. Now he's entering his 5th year. Do you think he's learned anything? He really is comfortable in his own skin. He brought in Mike Vrabel. I mean, Mike Vrabel, hello, could be a threat to his job. Jim Schwartz could be a threat to his job. He's not worried about that. And the Browns rewarded him and gave him, a long-term extension. So I think you got to like the stability. Sure, I think he'll get better, the longer he's been around. I mean, I don't know what Andy Reid looked like his first 4 years in the league, but I'm sure there was there's a reason he got fired in Philadelphia. And so I think there's a lot of potential and upside. You gotta let him grow. He's a very smart individual. I think he was smart enough to go out and say, I'm just not good with the skill set of Deshaun Watson. I'm good with the Joe Flacco type quarterback. I'm good with the Case Keenum, the Baker Mayfield, or the under center conventional quarterback. And maybe I need to have some help, and bring in somebody that's worked with mobile quarterbacks like Ken Dorsey, who worked with Cam Newton and Josh Allen. So we'll see. But no, I think, sure, Kevin Stefanski, but he's not on the field making the plays.
Yeah, the 2 pick sixes, and I'm sure he didn't coach Joe Flacco to do that. I don't know what the coaching point was. A coach never tells his quarterback to throw a pick six in a playoff game. He threw 2 of them on back-to-back plays. The other thing is, remember where the franchise was when Berry and Stefanski took over? Where are they at now? And Jim calls all the time, he wants a Super Bowl. All right, they got him to respectability in a playoff team. Now the next step is make them a continual playoff team, win a playoff game, get a home playoff game. Again, it doesn't happen from 0 to 65 overnight. So let's see. They've earned the right to see if they can now make this a perennial playoff team that gets home playoff games and goes deep into playoffs. At least in my mind, they have.
Well, unfortunately for the Browns, they're not like the Guardians playing in the AL Central, Like I said, you gotta, even the division is a gauntlet. And then if you won the division, look at the teams you still got to get by to even get to the Super Bowl. I mean, you can make a case for the Dolphins, the Bills, of course, the Chiefs, the Chargers now with because they have a quarterback and now they have Harbaugh. I mean, there's still 8, 9, 10 teams that you could make a case that you got to get through in order to get to the Super Bowl. So I just want a team that is in the playoffs, and now you have a chance, because I think the way the NFL is structured, you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. It comes down to maybe in that day, that playoff game, are you better than Lamar Jackson? Or is your quarterback better than Patrick Mahomes that day? So anything can happen, but you got to get into the tournament, and then you have a chance.
So this is from USA Today. It's ranking the head coaches for 2024. They go Andy Reid 1, Sean McVay number 2, Mike Tomlin 3, Kyle Shanahan 4. Hard to argue with any of those. Matt LaFleur 5. That's a little high in my mind. Harbaugh 6, Zach Taylor 7, Dan Campbell, D'Amico Ryans, and Sean McDermott 8, 9, and 10. And they go Kevin Stefanski 11. That's Fair. He's on the borderline of being a top 10 head coach. That's from USA Today. And again, Campbell hadn't done it very often. D'Amico Ryan's 1 year. Come and see me in another year. And Matt LaFleur, I'm still not sold on Jordan Love. There, I said it out loud. I want to see more from Jordan Love. He had a really good end of last year and won a playoff game against the Cowboys.
Yeah, all these, you take away their quarterback and maybe they're not as great, you know. Um, Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow doesn't play. What do?
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson went down the 2 years, before last year when he was MVP. Ravens did nothing, and I keep beating that same drum. All things being equal, if you got good players, a lot of times it comes down to the quarterback making the difference. And so I think that it keeps coming back to the quarterback the Browns have. He needs to be on the field. But listen, anything if these guys don't produce, the quarterback doesn't produce or gets hurt again, they're going to be looking elsewhere. And the same thing with the coach. If they don't continually, they feel the organization. You have the last I looked, I think they had the most players on the roster making over 10 million a year. Well, that puts pressure on the organization and the coach just because you got good players, and these players are now in their prime. They're not old, but Myles Garrett's in his 8th year. David Njoku, 8th year. Go right down the list. Joe Batonio, 11th year. They're in. They have a veteran-laden roster. They're built to win now. So that's why, I think every move they make is to try to get to the playoffs and have a chance to win the Super Bowl.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I can step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we will continue talking Browns. Stay with us on Sports for CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. This is from the Bleacher Report. One trade each NFL team should consider before the 2024 season. And the Browns are involved in 3 of them. So they say the Browns should trade Maurice Hurst to the Bears. The Browns would receive a 2025 6th-round pick for Hurst. Best thing they might be able to do in camp is take advantage of their incredible depth on defense to net some future picks. Browns only made 6 picks in 2024. Chiefs, they say the Chiefs should trade for Jack Conklin. The Chiefs would get Conklin. The Browns would get a 2025 3rd-round pick, a 2025 5th-round pick. Conklin has been one of the best or the better right tackles in the league, but injuries forced him out of the lineup last season. Rookie Dwan Jones looked good in his spot. They say the Eagles should trade for Alex Wright. Eagles receive Wright. Browns would receive a 2025 5th-round pick. Saw just 38% of the snaps for the Browns last season. Racked up 5 sacks, 6 TFLs, 5 quarterback hits. Let's start with that one, Fred. I don't see the Browns trading Alex Wright. They like their depth. That's what this defensive line is built on, is that depth.
Yeah, I mean, the guy really, the light went on in the second half of last season. He had like 5 sacks in 5 games. 3rd-round pick. This is kind of what you want, is the guys you draft and build from within. I don't think the Browns are in a hurry to give up on, a 3rd-year player that you draft in the 3rd round. you're more inclined to trade an older player that is on the bubble or not going to make the team in order to keep a younger guy. I mean, you got Okoronkwo and Smith, but they're on the older side along with Garrett. You want a little youth. You got Isaiah McGuire. I think the edge side, they're I don't see that move happening. I can see them making trades if they can get in return somebody that can help them now. Like say they feel that they have a defensive tackle that like Hurst that they feel okay, we're going to cut him, so let's get a team that's going to cut a tight end or a linebacker that the Browns think could help them, then make a swap so you both get who you want. I don't think a draft pick at this point really helps you unless you've exhausted options and you're going to cut the guy and then they say, all right, we'll just take a draft pick, kind of like they did last year with Josh Dobbs to get, to the other team to take their salary. So I don't see him trading right for sure.
Yeah, and Conklin, I think they want those three tackles. They don't want to start somebody that they have to pick up off the street and then put him on the at one of the tackle spots like they did last year. What are you paying attention to the next few days at the Greenbrier?
Well, the one thing I'll say about Conklin is, why would you want to trade with the Chiefs and help that's in your way to get to the Super Bowl? What's a draft pick going to do for you this year? That's the way they look at it. So, looking for the next few days, they really just have one practice before they come home after a walkthrough on Friday. I just think to see more of Watson, kind of keep beating that drum, that he continues to progress, takes the throws, gets more and more consistent, builds up his strength. So, he can make all the throws and that he gets his timing down. So when they get going, I don't know how much he'll play in the preseason, but the arrow's still pointing up as they get closer and closer to regular season. Also, on some of the injury guys, you want to see them start returning to practice and, all the way around, just kind of including your depth all the way around, just see what you have with some of the younger players.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, as always, great stuff. Remember, Fred is doing daily reports as well from the Greenbrier, so make sure you check him out. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
Thank you. Good to talk to all of you.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. He will have daily reports from the Greenbrier as he has so far. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Nick Karns coming up from the Barking Browns podcast. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Butter, lewd, and scratch, find the letters, make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30 show. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Last year, we had a lot of fun with NFL Network analysts Adam Rank predicting the Browns to be 6-11 last year. This year, he again goes his game-by-game prediction for the Browns.
I was off last year with my Browns prediction. Will I make that mistake again? Well, let's go to the schedule. Week 1, playing host to the Dallas Cowboys. That's a Browns victory. The Cowboys don't beat good teams, but Week 2, road trip to my friends down in Duval County. I'm going to take the Jags in that one. But Week 3, playing host to the New York Giants. That's a Browns victory. Road trip once again to Las Vegas in Week 4. I'm going to take the Raiders in that one. But this is part of a 3-game road trip. Give me the Browns over the Commanders in Week 5, but the Eagles over the Browns in Week 6. Now, the Browns return home for 3 consecutive home games. Give me a win over the Cincinnati Bengals. Give me a win over the Baltimore Ravens. That's a tough stretch. Bengals and Ravens back-to-back. I think the Browns can take it, and I think they'll beat the Chargers, too, to go into the bye week. Then when they return, a little bit of a letdown. They lose on the road to the New Orleans Saints, but beat the Steelers in Week 12. Perhaps they were looking ahead to that one. They defeat the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football in Week 13, but lose to the Steelers on the road in Week 14. A win over the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 15, kind of establishing themselves, but after that big win, end up losing to the Cincinnati Bengals on the road, but defeat the Miami Dolphins in Week 17. And then in Week 18, I have the Baltimore Ravens winning that one, but still, I have the Cleveland Browns for 10 wins this season in a trip to the playoffs.
Let's welcome in Nick Karns from the Barking Browns podcast. Nick, a lot better than the 6-11. 10-7 certainly among the outcomes. We'll see.
It's nice to see a change of tune this time around. I think the Browns earned that type of respect that they're starting to get a little bit. And it just, with the amount of players that they lost last year and the success that they still managed to find, it's hard for me to imagine that having a healthier team and maybe a little more injury luck on your side, 10 wins is maybe a little lower than I'd like it to be. But if you're going to the playoffs, you're giving yourself a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. And that's all I really could ask for from the season. So it's a credit to them and what they accomplished last year that the tune nationally is changing.
Yeah, and I would say 9 or 10 wins is the floor, and the ceiling's probably 11 or 12. Just the North is brutal, so 12 wins is going to be tough for any team in that division. Kevin Stefanski talked about a guy that we've talked about before, D'Onta Foreman, running back, figures to get some playing time until Nick Chubb is back and ready to go. Kevin Stefanski talked about what he's seen from D'Onta Foreman.
Has played really good football in his career. Runs hard, as you see, just turning the tape, is a physical runner, can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I do think he brings an element to this room and see how it all shakes out. But certainly is a veteran that you can turn on the tape and see what he's been able to do.
And Nick, you tweeted this out. So best year as a pro came in 2022 with Carolina, 203 carries, almost 1,000 yards, 4.5 yards a carry, 5 touchdowns. His running back coach then, you draw the parallel there, Deuce Staley, the running back coach for the Cleveland Browns. Foreman is a guy, I saw a stat, whenever he gets, I believe it's 18 carries, he gets at least 64 yards or something like that. It's a guy that you give him the ball and he gets yardage.
Right. I think D'Onta just hasn't had the opportunity to get a ton of those games where he's really been fed. It's no coincidence to me that Foreman ends up with the Browns with the running backs coach that he's had so much success with. I like it. You know what? Jerome Ford's got that real breakaway type speed. He's an explosive player, but he might not be the greatest bruiser, that type of player. Whereas I think Foreman brings that tackle breaking ability. Maybe he could fill the goal line role that Kareem Hunt did so well last year. And I think it really adds a nice 1-2 punch between the two of them. Nick's just been that guy for the Browns that you could rely on to break the tackles, to get in the end zone, to be that force. And I think Foreman really could do a nice job of filling that role while he recovers. And it gives the Browns a lot of leeway, right? Because they don't have to rush Nick Chubb back if you've got that Jerome Ford and D'Onta Foreman, and not to mention Nyheim Hines. But I think Foreman definitely has upside. He's shown it before, and maybe in Cleveland is where he'll get those types of that bulk of the carries and could be really productive.
Yeah, and the thing with Deuce Staley, he definitely knows how to use him. There are certain things you ask him to do. There are certain things you don't ask him to do. And Deuce Staley, as you point out, knows what those are. This is from NFL.com. Veterans who could lose their starting job in training camp. They say Jack Conklin. 2 things working in Conklin's favor as he tries to regain his starting spot. Browns are paying him quite well thanks to the major extension he signed late in 2022. Conklin recently proclaimed himself healthy following knee injury that ended his 2023 campaign in Week 1. you know, he hasn't been healthy the last couple of years. When healthy, he's among the best right tackles in football. So I could see where you would want him to play.
Yeah, it kind of strikes me as surprising with Jack because I very much agree with you, Dave. I think when Conklin was on the field, he was good. It's a weird situation for the Browns because you've got 3 tackles now because DeJuan Jones was such a surprise last year and a really good one that helped them get to the playoffs along the way. Now so I could see if DeJuan was coming off of a healthy season, and maybe you're saying, okay, well, Jack's coming back from injury. We're not sure exactly where he's going to be at physically, so maybe we try to bring him along more slowly. But when you look at the Browns' offensive line, you're saying all 3 of these tackles ended up having their seasons cut short by injury. So I would say that all 3 of them are in the same boat. Jack did get that endorsement by signing his next contract and with a lot of guaranteed money. So to me, it's just a matter of health. I would expect Conklin to be the starter. He's been a great piece of the Browns offensive line over the years now. And I think as long as he has that ability, the Browns trust him. They paid him for a reason. And I think having 3 tackles is a good problem to have.
Yeah, if you think you have enough offensive linemen, go get a couple more because you're probably going to need them within a couple of weeks. Nick, Karns and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about the new Amari Cooper contract, as well as wide receivers in the NFL. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Nick Karns from the Barking Browns podcast. Nick, the Browns avoided a mess that several other teams are in right now. Namely, you got the Cowboys and Lamb, you got the Bengals and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They got Amari Cooper's contract questions ironed out. What did you think, and what did that contract say to you about the Browns and Cooper?
You know what? I'm really glad that Amari Cooper is coming off a season where he set a career high in receiving yards, right? He was the hallmark of reliability and just the offense as a whole. And I think he's incredibly important because there's a ton of guys in the Browns wide receiver room that are maybe a little more unproven. They certainly have potential, but when you're looking at, okay, who can we rely on to be our productive, the leader of our pass catching group, it's Amari Cooper. And I think to get this deal done, especially in the landscape of wide receivers where there's a lot of issues going on, I never think it's a good thing. Especially as the Bengals, when you've got Jamar Chase not practicing but being there, you've got T. Higgins having some bad feelings towards the team, and you're not really sure what the future is there. You want the team to have as much time together. You want the feelings to be good on both sides. And from everything Amari said and everything that Andrew Berry has said, when the Browns guarantee him, give him that security with the contract, and so he doesn't have to worry about getting injured in practice because he doesn't have any guarantees on his money. I think that builds that goodwill between the wide receiver and the team, and really sets the team up to just focus on football.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. So we have alluded to it. This is from Get Up from ESPN. So the guys that cover it nationally, talking about the mess at the Bengals wide receiver room with Jamar Chase in particular.
They're not calling it a hold-in, but for all intents and purposes, it doesn't matter what you call it. That's what's happening. So is there an end in sight to this one? We're talking about how easy it should be to make a deal for C.D. Lamb. Jamar Chase, I would argue, is as good as any receiver and as valuable as any receiver in the NFL.
I would say that it's interesting because if you listen to Mike Brown talk right at the start of training camp, he said, and these were his words, the die has been cast. that the time to do these deals is in the off season, and he thought, in his opinion, that it will wait till next off season. I don't know that that's the case. Again, if he's not on the field now, why is he going to change his mind? What's going to force him to step on the football field? Lewis, you mentioned 4.8. 3.8 of that was a roster bonus that's already been paid. $1 million in base salary. So he would be making $1 million in base salary to step onto the football field. When there are other receivers making upwards of $30+ million a year, are you risking your future for $1 million when there's all that money that's out there?
So where does this go,
a lot.
All right, so we mentioned that, Nick. Here, just take a look at the wide receiver contracts that have been done within the past couple of months. This is from Spotrac. So you've got Justin Jefferson, 4 years, $140 million. St. Brown, 4 years, $120 million. DJ Moore just got 4 years, $110 million. A.J. Brown, 3 years, $96. Calvin Ridley, 4 years, $92. Jalen Waddle, 3 years, $85. 3 years, $75 for Smith. Collins, $373. Pittman, 3 years, $70 million. The deal for Jerry Jeudy, 3 years, $52.5 looks like a bargain. And Mike Evans, 2 years at $41 million. Yeah, if I'm giving Jamar Chase advice as his agent, I keep the ball cap on. We'll get you a 9-iron. We'll get you a putter. We'll let you go play a lot of golf.
Yeah, you know what? You look at that list and you say the only thing the wide receiver market seems to do is go up. And from a Browns perspective, I think it's a credit to them that they paid Jerry Jeudy early before a lot of these contracts got signed as well, because like you said, David, it does look like a bargain in comparison to a lot of the market itself has skyrocketed. And that's a really precarious situation that the Bengals are in, because not only is Jamar Chase not happy with his contract situation, but I think it's the worst kept secret that this is going to be T. Higgins last year in Cincinnati. So all of a sudden you've got Joe Burrow's both of his best pass catchers best pass catchers that are miffed with the team, and that is certainly not a recipe for success.
Well, your line has not protected him. He's been injured 2 of his 4 years, and now you're going to tell him, we can't afford to keep your second wide receiver, and your first wide receiver is going to be PO'd because we're paying him roughly $34 million below what market value is for the number one receiver in the NFL.
It doesn't seem to benefit them to wait any. Like, if I was the Bengals, I would say we need to get this deal done today, because eventually CeeDee Lamb's going to sign his contract, right? And once that happens, Jamar Chase is going to want more than he got. And so I just don't see any benefit to waiting or dragging this out any longer. You know, you saw, I know it's not the same situation, but Joe Burrow was dealing with an injury last year, and in camp he didn't get to have the reps that he wanted. And then he came to Cleveland, and they really offensively were a mess. I think these reps are really important in camp, and for Chase to just be on the sidelines is not a good situation there at all.
No, and you know, he can't be happy with it. The other thing is, so they can pick up his 5th-year option, but you know what? You want to buy your way out of that. At the end of the day, it's $30 million. You can always go to him and say, we'll give you $10-15 million this year, $15 million next year, ramp it up to the $35 million. But that price tag isn't going down. So you know what? It's fine with me. It's a division.
You won't let me complaining.
It's a division rival. They can do business the way they want to. Nick, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Nick Karns, make sure you check him out, the Barking Browns podcast, one of the co-hosts. Before we go, some late-breaking news with the Cavaliers, as they have signed Jared Allen to a 3-year, $91 million extension. So Allen now tied to the Cavs for the next 5 years at $131 million over that time. So you now have Allen, Mobley, and Donovan Mitchell all signed up long-term. Darius Garland is still not extended, so it'll be interesting to see. The one thing it does, it really limits what they can do now relative to the salary cap, because that second apron makes it a hard cap. But 3 years, $91 million extension. Jared Allen not going anywhere. He is now under contract, 5 years and $131 million with the Cavaliers for the next 5 years. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.